Good morning. Obviously backed by popular demand. I was interested in the slideshow by the land use. I noticed the age cohorts, we only go up to 89. I was wondering what the age group after 89 is called. I'm anxious to know what that is. Anyway, in your packet there's two things. One is a fairly lengthy description of how we make a water supply using Truckee River water resources. In addition, there's this slideshow. So I thought what I was trying to target was how prepared is the Truckee Meadows Water Authority to respond to upcoming perceived changes in meeting the demands for M&I purposes within the Truckee Meadows proper. We have a lot of questions here that I hope to be able to get to and answer for you as we go along through this. So you tell me the degree of depth you want to go into how we make a water supply versus how we manage the water supply going forward and how we're planning for the water supply. So let me just jump into the slideshow and then you can redirect as needed. So generally, the Truckee Meadows began back in the 1850s, really with a bunch of farmers coming in, ranchers coming in and setting up a major irrigation system. What you see here is just a graphic showing the Truckee and Carson systems that are intertwined and interconnected basically through the Derby Canal, because at Derby Dam there is a diversion which takes water over to the Lahontan Reservoir. I won't go into the intricacies of why that is, but let me just say that Lake Tahoe is the largest storage basin on the river. It'll store basically as tall as I am, 6.2 feet of water, 722,000 acre feet. It's our primary reservoir. And then as we work our way down, we have Donner, Prosser, Boca, Independence, Stampede. Half of Donner Lake storage rights are owned by the Truckee Meadows Water Authority. All the storage rights in Independence are owned by Truckee Meadows Water Authority. We use those supplies for drought reserves. We don't release water out of those reservoirs until we have to use them. This was the first year in 20 years where we actually had to release some water out of Donner Lake and out of some other stored sources that we had. First time in 20 years, last time was 1992. And I'll show you some graphics here in a moment. The waters in Lake Tahoe and the waters in Boca Reservoir have to be released by court decree. They have to be released to maintain a flow at the California-Nevada state line, day in, day out. Today there's no water in there because all the water's been released. And so what happens when there's no water to be released or to make a water supply for the Truckee Meadows Water Authority or for the Truckee Meadows proper? We deliver or produce approximately 75,000 acre feet a year today. And I'll show you some pie charts here in a moment. Approximately 90% of the region's water supply comes from the Truckee River. The balance comes from groundwater. And the surrounding areas, Lemon Valley, the northern part of Spanish Springs, and predominantly south of Zalesi Lane, South Truckee Meadows area, is more of a groundwater-based system than it is a surface system. So I'll be directing my comments towards Tumwa today. Tumwa tomorrow is going to get bigger, and the last graphic we'll get to is show you Tumwa tomorrow. So I wanted to set that stage of how the river works, how the system works. I'm skipping a lot of information for you, but let's go to the next slide. Let's talk about river variability. Next. So this snowpack's the big driver for our region. When we have lots of snow, we get a lot of flow in the river. When we get lots of snow, the lake fills up. And when we don't have a lot of snow like we've had in 12, 13, 14, you see those 3 years on the right-hand side. They don't compare if you look at 88 and also at 90, 91, 92. 91, 92 are the critical years that we plan against. Those are the lowest years of 110 years of record. I have to use what data we have. We go through a stochastic exercise, and we've done a lot of that type of work, and we basically come back to the historic data is the best data that we have. So I'm showing you these slides just to give you an idea how variable the supply can be year in, year out. In 97, you may recall, we had this massive flood. That was in 91, 92. You can see on the graphic there, you see the little red bar. That was 2014 river flows, snowpack. So the variability is what the Truckee Meadows Water Authority plans for. And this is just taking that same bar graph that I showed you there and just highlighting the, from left to right, low water year 1931 up to 1983, where we had massive rainfall in 1983. And the black bars, those are the years we planned for. That's 1987 through 1994. Those black bars represent that 8-year period. They weren't stacked up like you see here. You have a dry, 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 wet, dry, dry, wet. Currently, we're dry, dry, dry. Is this year going to be wet, or is this year going to be dry? I don't know. I can't tell you that. I do know it does rain every now and again, and it does snow every now and again. Average rainfall for the area is 7.5 inches a year. That's what we plan against. It is I have to remind folks, it is a high desert community. We're very fortunate to have a river running through the middle of it. The red bars there are currently showing you 12, 13, and 14, where we stand right now. 12, 13, and 14 are not as bad as what we currently plan for. Now, what does 2014, 15 hold for us? I couldn't tell you. So we'll be looking at that. Will we change our planning criteria? We might, we may not. Next. Again, just showing you variability. And what this graphic's useful to show you, even in the massive water years that we have, the green represents for you the amount of water that the Truckee Meadows consumes or diverts from the Truckee River. The little red you see, that's when we have to either peak with our groundwater or we have to fill in the holes with groundwater and surface water coming out of either Stampede or coming out of Independence or Donner Lake. And the black line represents how much treatment plant capacity we have. All right, next. And on we go to managing this raw water. Again, precipitation, snowpack is what drives all our water supply availability on the Truckee River. This graphic is just showing you the elevation of Lake Tahoe. The Tahoe elevation is the big driver for our water supply. We're not the only user of the river. You'll get that here in a moment. But I'm just showing you this graphic to give you an idea how it usually takes anywhere from 3 to 4 seasons to get to the rim of Lake Tahoe. But generally, it might take 1 season just to come right out of it. Next. And what this graphic is comparing for you, the red line represents where we are today. And we basically start our tracking of dry cycles, or I prefer the term non-wet years. We begin tracking those when Tahoe is full. And we have to go through this release, fill cycle. And we've done that now for 3 years, and sure enough, you can just see how these drought cycles just overlay, and they almost look identical from drought cycle to drought cycle to drought cycle. The tricky part is how long is a drought cycle? And the one we planned for is the record that you see here. It's about an 8-year, 9-year run. So we've taken that historic 8-year, we've added a few more years to it just to plan to what we feel is a very conservative position, because when we were here in 92 going through a very severe drought, the community basically said, we don't want to have major interruptions in community services or in water supply. What can you do about it? So I don't know who the genius was back in 1934 when they bought Independence Lake, but they really did something smart for the community. We hold Independence Lake strictly for times when the red line starts getting as low as it is, in the event we have to release water out of Independence Lake. So again, just showing you variability here in various flows. In 1997, the flows are off the chart, but there's that little green usage pattern of the community. Fairly steady, year in, year out, slightly growing ever so much, but for the most part, it's fairly constant year in, year out. But I'm just showing you here how you get a lot of water in the Truckee system. There's water in the Truckee system every year. Right now, we are currently diverting water out of the Truckee River to treat through our Chalk Bluff plant. Because there's side water coming in, there's natural flows, and we just had some rainstorms a few weeks ago. A couple of things happen in the fall. When the freezing temperatures come into play, the trees shut down. The phreatic movement of the water shuts down. All of a sudden, river flows pick up. You head into the fall, you get into November, most people begin to stop their irrigation. So that's less water that has to be diverted. The demand begins to go down. Currently today, we're around 35, 40 million gallons a day are being produced through our plant. The summertime operation will do 120 to 130 million gallons a day. It's almost a 4-to-1 ratio, summer to winter. So you have all this extra plant, and you can see how the green is fairly small on the left side and the right side, because that's the winter time and the fall season. The middle is the summer. So we build the plant to meet a summer demand. Point of story is we always have a supply from the Truckee River. We may not have 100% supply during the course of the year. There may be a few months that you see there in 92, and we roll to the next slide, I'll show you something else. Here is the 93. The brown represents well water. The blue represents surface supply. Remember, groundwater is always brown. Surface water is always blue. Okay, I tried that joke before. Nobody got it then either. So this was 2013, just to give you a comparison. So 2014, the next slide. What this one shows you is, oh, okay, so we ran into this year coming into about July, August, we began to project, actually we started planning for this last January thinking we may not have river supplies. Now when I say river supplies, we may not have releases from Lake Tahoe or Boca to release water all the way through the year in order to make the supply. So knowing that, we had to do some estimates. Okay, where are we going to make our water supply from? And again, this graphic is showing you there's our blue, which is generally surface water. And then the brown is the groundwater again. And red is water we take out of Independence. The green is some water we have stored in Boca. And the yellow is some water that we had stored in Donner Lake. We also took some out of water we had stored in Independence. Now, sometimes when I talk with people, they think when I say we plan for an 8-year drought cycle, we don't have an 8-year supply sitting someplace. It's this cycle of the demand picks up in the summer, the demand goes down in the winter. The winter brings the water supply, which that water supply is able to carry us through the summer season. So you have to keep in mind there's this cycle that takes place. And what we do then is we hold in reserve the groundwater and the surface water strictly for a year like this year. Well, what did we do this year? When you get into the fall, you have to release water out of the reservoirs. Cal Dam safety requires that the reservoirs have sufficient storage space. Donner Lake has to be to its rim. We have to release 3,000 acre-feet out of Independence. You have to bring Prosser Reservoir down to 9,800 acre-feet in the reservoir, which holds 25,000 acre-feet. You have to bring Boca down to 10,000 acre-feet, so it has storage, but you have to have certain space in Stampede, the largest reservoir in the system. It holds 225,000 acre-feet. You have to have, I think it's about 150,000 acre-feet. You have to have space in the reservoir to capture a storm event. So every fall we have to release a certain volume of water. And so what we did this year, since we had to release water out of Donner, we had to release water out of Independence, let's time it so that when we call for increased management or increased conservation, we use the water we're going to use anyway, because what happens every year, those portions that we release in the fall, it gets replenished in the spring. Independence will fill up again, and Donner will fill up again. So really, we'll be starting this coming season exactly where we started this last season. Our reserves will be full. So you've probably heard this term, this acronym TROA. It's the Truckee River Operating Agreement. The Truckee River Operating Agreement is the product of the negotiated river settlement, which is incorporated into PL 101-618, which was the federal statute that set in play, let's solve the river issues, let's make a deal between Sierra Pacific, Pyramid Lake Paiute Tribe, and the United States so that we increase our ability to store more water. So this is pre-TROA upstream reserves. This you can see the fill, release, that's why it's so lumpy, fill, release. And then you see the big dip on the right-hand side. That big dip on the right-hand side is the critical year, 1992. That's what we project. We use most of our reserves is in that critical dry year. So this is approximately 27,000 acre-feet when it's full. It drips, and we want to keep this as full as possible through the season. We'll fill it back up to that 27,000 acre-feet or more when we head into the spring of 2015. Anticipating, not really knowing what 2015 summer season is going to be, but we will have the reserves to do that. Next. So what happens in post-TROA, all of a sudden the storage basically triples for us. Because when we release water in the fall, what we're going to do is we're going to credit store that. We're going to be able to capture more water in the reservoirs. Also, in the springtime when the runoff begins, because we are going to, in essence, change the flow of water at the California-Nevada state line. Instead of it being a fixed flow at 500 cubic feet per second, what we're going to do is say, instead of releasing 100 cubic feet per second, can you hold that back in the reservoir? That's how we're able to accumulate these large volumes. And the transaction is the federal government owns the reservoirs, Truckee Meadows Water Authority owns the water rights, and between the Pyramid Lake Tribe and Truckee Meadows, we need the water in drought. When you get into these wet years that you see there, 87, 88, 89, so on and so forth, when we don't need the water, the excess water is turned over for fish purposes. That's in essence the negotiated river settlement. So that's how it'll work. We get that much more storage under TROA, and we're just about, currently we're anticipating TROA to go into effect April 1 of 2015, which is a good thing. Next. So to your question, Ron, about the users of the Truckee system, this one's an interesting graphic because, again, we're going back to 85, and we're just showing you the various users. You can see the M&I, municipal industrial, is the brown. It's on the bottom. It's fairly flat, fairly constant, year in, year out, the volume of water that is used for, diverted by the Truckee Meadows Water Authority. Yellow is other irrigation in and around the Truckee Meadows, and then the two larger users are beneficiaries of the Truckee River waters, or TCID and Pyramid Lake, those two colors. And it changes. In a dry year, much like this year, if the Truckee Carson irrigation were able to divert, they would be diverting more water. Since they've had a lot of repair problems and issues in operating the canal, most of that water is flown into Pyramid Lake. In a very wet year, when you have the Carson River supplying 100% of the needs on the Houghton side into the Newlands project, you don't need to divert water from the Truckee side, then most of the water ends up in Pyramid Lake. Next. So this is looking at typical diversions of the Truckee River, both dry years and non-dry years. In the non-dry years, we will divert, again, approximately 70,000 or 60,000 acre feet. But keep in mind, whatever the Truckee Meadows Water Authority produces, approximately half of that in an annual basis makes its way back to the sewer treatment plant. So the net volume of water that we take from the Truckee River is about 30,000 acre feet. The first slide I showed you had about 50,000 acre feet year in, year out on average coming across the California-Nevada state line, and we're only taking net value about 30,000 of that. Very small percentage. In the dry years like this year, obviously that percentage goes up because there's less water, and our uses don't change, but just the percentage changes there for you. Give you an idea, we take about 8%. So this year we will produce, I think we only produced maybe 9,000 acre feet of groundwater against a demand of 72,000 acre feet. Almost the same amount of surface water was diverted that we did the year before. So next slide, sir. This is just showing you water production against population. You might ask the question, why the big dip there around 2001, 2002? I think the biggest change there was the fact that we separated the water utility from the power company. And now all of a sudden you had people seeing their water bill truly for the first time, as opposed to being buried within a power, electric, gas, and water bill. Now you saw your water bill, and information is power. We've done quite a bit of studies on this, and on staff there, Dr. Stoddard has written a couple of papers about it, and everybody wants to research this project. I keep telling them it's just one big science project that we're managing here when it comes to this water supply. The second thing that's happened over time was we've had weather come into play. There's a national trend towards understanding that water is a scarce resource. There's a heightened sense that we need to work as a community to manage our resources more efficiently and in a more cohesive fashion. Third thing that came into play was when the water utility came over, it had a revenue requirement of $75 million. It had rates that only generated $60 million. So in 2003, 2004, TMWA had to raise its rates, and so all of a sudden now you're seeing your water bill, now you're seeing your rates go up, and that has a tendency to get people to go, oh, I better remanage how I do my water, because I'm paying for it now. Those are the major trends that we see. The dip that you see in 06, 07, 08 is just that as a result of, I heard comment a little bit earlier about the economy to 07, 08 and population. We had a net out-migration of about 20 to 35,000 people left the area beginning 2007 through 2008. We saw our vacancies and our billing records go up Typically, we run about 1,500 to 2,000 in vacancies, and that number jumped up to about 5,000, 4,500 to 5,000. And that ran like that from about 2007, 8, 9, and leading into 10. Up through the university, you can look at some of their data. They've been tracking this as well. We're basically back to a growth period where we've had the net outmigration through basically 07, 08, 09, and now we've seen that come back to where it was before. So we're almost back to a 2005 population. So what does that do for our planning purposes? Basically all it does is shift the curve. The curve that we had in 05 was here, and then the curve we had in 10 was here, and then what we did was now we just shifted it over because we lost all those people, but it doesn't necessarily change facilities or our projections. And that's the result of what we have going on. Next. So I put this together for you. This is, again, my focus is Truckee Meadows Water Authority. What you don't see here added to this is the county projections on top of these various customer groups that you see. I'm talking individual projections. Here you see Tumwa single-family, multifamily, general commercial, and metered irrigation. These are our estimates for usage here. You see Sun Valley General Improvement District, which is a wholesale, and you see the Spanish Springs, South Truckee Meadows projections as well. But that was just for when they were buying wholesale water from us. It does not include the groundwater that they were producing within their various area. So this number, the graph here would actually have probably another 15 to 20,000 acre feet added to it, and that would be the projection. This goes out to 2050. Similar to the population projections that you'll see long term is there is a flattening out of the curve. It just doesn't keep growing because with anything you have to feed it resources. As the resources get more constrained in the future, the economics come into play. There's less land to build on. The constraints come into play. There's fewer water rights available. The prices are going to come into play, which is going to restrict the development that we see long term. And when I say long term, I'm post 2035, 2040.
John, we have one question.
Yes, sir.
Go ahead, Brian.
John, system loss, what is that?
System loss is approximately, in our system, we've gone through a major rehab of the system. In addition, most of the systems are new. The county systems are new, less than 25 years old. Most of the development has taken place since about 1970 forward, has been with new technology, new plumbing, that sort. The pre-1970 stuff is a lot of steel, a lot of copper and this sort had to be replaced. So the system losses for us range between 4 and 5%. What is the loss? It's major leaks. It is leaks on the customer side of the meter. It's leaks on our side of the meter. Those types of things come into play. When you have a major leak, how much water do you lose in major leak? Do you lose millions of gallons? No, you don't lose millions of gallons. What about fire flow? Fire, we don't put out that many fires. If anything, it's probably closer to 200,000 gallons a year, 500,000 gallons a year for fire suppression. Those are not the major factors that deal with it. So losses are just that. You have inefficient meters, so you can't necessarily capture because a meter is rated for plus or minus 3% of the gauging of the meter, so you don't have 100% read on all the meters. So all that is captured by loss. Next slide, if you would. This is probably where I wanted to zoom in because I thought this was the focus, or one of the foci of what we were talking about. What I'm showing you here is just, again, this is the river graphic, but now I've broken the river into 3 dominant reaches. We have Farad, which is California-Nevada state line, Farad to Vista, which is basically Tumwa, and then from Vista to Derby, that's another reach, and then lastly we have the Derby to Pyramid Lake reach. Within each of these reaches there is a collection of water rights. If we go to the next slide here, what we've done here, this is a little bit dated. I think this is 2010, it needs to be refreshed. What I'm showing you here is in each of those reaches there is a certain amount of water rights that have been set in time and perpetuity that cannot be added to. This was the Ordage Decree in 1944 that said once they got through all the claimants, here's what water rights are available in these areas based on the historic use of the various irrigators at that time. That case began in 1917, finished in 1944. So Farad to Vista, about 150,000 acre feet. Vista to Derby, about 2,500, and Derby to Pyramid Lake, 36,000. The Derby to Pyramid Lake, those are owned by the Pyramid Lake Paiute tribe for the most part. Totaling 188. Then you have some creeks. We have the Ferret Highland Creeks, which are Hunter Creek and Dog Creek predominantly. And then as you go south, Truckee Meadows, you have Whites Creek, Thomas Creek, Galena Creek. Those are the big ones down there. So all total, there's about 225,000 acre feet available in the Truckee River system. You can't add to it. That's the number. That is a future constraint. And the future is a ways out there. And then I go through showing you the various columns of the various owners of these water rights. The TMWA Washoe County column will be combined. That'll be about 120,000 acre feet. The more interesting column is the right-hand column, and that's water rights that we're projecting available. The subtotal there is about 51,000 acre feet of main stem water right, and you have 20,000 acre feet of creek water rights going to be available. The bigger question here is who owns those water rights, and how big blocks of water do they own? The larger blocks of water rights, the hundreds, the 200, the 300 acre foot blocks, are few and far between. The smaller pieces, the 0.01 acre feet, the 0.1 acre feet, the 2 acre feet, they're out there, but they're diced up. We've diced them up. You may not be aware, but there's a little conservation district here in town called the Washoe County Water Conservation District. They track all the water rights because they bill everybody who owns a water right. And so there's some 30,000 parcels spread out, and each of those parcels have a claim to some 40,000 pieces of water rights. So finding and aggregating, finding willing sellers and aggregating those water rights from very small pieces to maybe larger pieces is going to be difficult to do. If you were here in 05, you may recall in March, there was a dark night on March 19th of 2005 when Syntex got involved in the water rights market. That afternoon, the price of water rights was $3,500 an acre foot. Later that evening, they were averaging about $43,000 an acre foot. That carried on into the 2006, 2007 until such time as things happened. The market, Syntex left town, and so the price of water rights is stabilized. Currently in the open market, if you can find a willing seller, you might be able to buy them anywhere from, we bought some really small stuff at $2,500 an acre foot up to as high as $6,000 an acre foot right now. That's where the market is trending right now for surface water rights. So all that story to say this, to make a water supply off the Truckee River system, you need two things. You need a water right and you need a drought supply. We have taken care of, through the Truckee River operating agreement, we've taken care of the drought supply. We produce about 75,000 acre feet a year. That particular supply project will take us up to 119,000 acre feet a year. The projected 119,000 acre feet per year is approximately the year 2043, 2050, somewhere in that range. So the drought supply component is taken care of. The other component, the water right component that I'm showing you here, there looks like there's more than sufficient water rights between the available main stem of 51 and the creek of 70. There's available water rights. The bigger question will be who's willing to sell that and at what price. The guy who holds that last water right and willing to sell is going to make a fortune. Let me respond to the question about Vittler. Vittler is in operation. We currently have it tied into our system at the north end of 11 Valley. We are currently pumping it and exercising it to the tune of about 800 gallons a minute right now. We wanted to do that prior to the merger to make sure the system works, get all the bugs out of it so that we do have that water supply available. Between the time when that project is fully committed or the water rights are sold, the utility has the opportunity to exercise those water rights in the event of an emergency or a drought or that sort. One last slide I believe I have here. Yes, here we go. So currently this is showing you the Truckee extent of the Truckee Meadows retail service boundaries, and you can see the dashed areas are the areas that will be merged into TMWA. Those are the current county systems. That's where TMWA is responsible for at this time. We have, again, the drought supply component, the backup supply component between groundwater and upstream storage is addressed through TROA. We also spend quite a bit of time doing a recharge program when we get into the winter months when we're basically the only diverters on the system. We have sufficient water rights that we can divert water. So what do we do with that? We start injecting treated water into many of our production wells. We're very active out in the top left-hand corner of the drawing there, out in the state area. You see those 3 dots up there. We're very active in injecting water in Lemon Valley. We're very active injecting water along the central corridor of the Truckee Meadows and to the south there where you see all our major dots. There is a small project that the county is doing in Golden Valley for the residents there. It's about 100 acre-feet a year is what they're trying to inject in there to augment supplies for the residents on domestic wells in that area. Our plan, we also, in the top, on the right-hand side, there's 1 dot there that we have a permit, and that's in our Spanish Springs well. It's called our Hawkins Court well. We do anywhere, combined, we do approximately 2,500 acre-feet between all these 3 zones where we inject water. Once we merge with the county, we will be looking to expand the injection opportunities by looking at what wells it makes sense to inject water in. We'll be going down south and doing quite a bit of injection down there. In addition to the southern area, what we plan on doing, there is facilities on the drawing board to put in some additional pumping and piping so we can move water up the hill, up that Mount Rose Fan area, so we can start putting supply in there and therefore resting the wells in order to augment supplies down in that area to help offset or alleviate some of the concerns of the domestic well owners in that area. We're very keen in understanding that the utility is in partnership with the groundwater resources that are available to it. We seek to preserve our permits by cooperating with the state engineer's office and also taking these steps such as recharge so that if the emergency comes or the time needs when we need to extract the water, it's available there for us. And let me take it to comments on the demand side management. And then also I heard Las Vegas. What we don't do here in the Truckee Meadows is any water that's saved is saved. And when you get into a cash for grass process that I've seen, for example, Las Vegas, they spent close to $35 million for cash for grass. So what they did is they convinced people to take out their grass, which makes sense. But then what they did with that saved waters, they turned around and sold it to the next person to hook up. So in that sense, there really was no savings. Here in the Truckee Meadows, when we do demand management, our objective is to, much like we did this last summer, we called for 10% additional. Why? Because we wanted to preserve, keep in storage as much as possible the water we had in Independence and in Stampede Reservoir. So when we talk about doing more aggressive conservation activity, particularly going forward as it relates to landscapes, medians, and that sort, I totally agree. We have the hardest time with managing irrigation because you get so much overspray. You can drive into the Northwest and see a lot of this. We get a lot of calls from people complaining about, why do I have to conserve? And then I can drive up, say, Somerset Boulevard, and there's water everywhere. Very difficult to do. So we've been directed by our board to look into working with the local staffs and get pretty aggressive on, is there a smarter way to do some of the landscape requirements as it comes to both commercial and then residential properties. I know that Loretto has been active down in the South Truckee Meadows working on a project to that degree where they have the lot and then the front part of the lot is managed by the HOA, and there's restrictions on what you can't change the landscaping in the front yard, with anticipated hope that we can reduce, or he can reduce, the amount of dedication of resources for the front yard, leaving the domestic and the backyard to the homeowner. So hopefully we'll be able to reduce the dedication requirements for that. Now, I've covered so much stuff, I'm sure you're just aching to ask me a question or just say, you got it all, and I'm dismissed. So I'm hoping for the latter, but I'm here to field any questions you may have.
Questions, I think first Mr. Humke.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If we could return to your slide 20, the so-called rainbow slide.
Oh, the rainbow slide, yes.
The pursuant to Councilman Smith's question, system loss, looks like you project increases through 2050. Is there mitigation planned? Do you have to? Is this the water distribution system? You got bad pipes. You got old pipes. Is that what you're saying?
That's principally the biggest thing we have, but particularly when you go downtown and the downtown Reno where we are today here, this is stuff that's as old as 50, 60 years old. More downtown core you get, it's even older than that. When we were at Sierra Pacific back in '95, I think they actually pulled out their last wooden pipe. That gives you an idea. We're constantly fixing pipes. We're constantly responding to leaks. I think we take pride in this. That you call us, we're out there to fix a leak right away. But you just have leaks in the system. Some you see, most you don't.
Do you have a plan for mitigation? Are you going to go down and replace the water distribution system?
We do. We've taken a historic look and we've mapped it, GIS, and you can look at some of these streets because we're constantly out to the same street. And now with the technology available today, we can see, oh, this street has 2 leaks, this one has 18. Which one are we going to replace first? Well, let's do the one with 18 because it makes sense. So what we try to do is time it in coordination with Reno Sparks Washoe when they're doing street replacement, sewer replacement. The last thing we want to do is go in there with a brand new street and tear it up. So we do a lot of coordination with them, and that's when we budget our stuff as you guys budget your stuff. But we do have a plan in place to go after these.
Is there does this represent a factor that is a kind of an industry standard for municipal water companies?
It is. We're on the low end of that standard. When you compare us to other places, they're up 7, 8, sometimes as high as 12%. Ours around 4 or 5% is a fairly low standard, yeah. We don't like it. We're trying to fix it. We get after them as quick as we can, but it's part of the nature of the business. It leaks.
Some of us represent unincorporated areas, and unincorporated areas are somewhat less than fond of TMWA or fearful of them. How do you expand your service area? Will you expand it?
The way we expand it is in response to development. We do not actively expand. We're more of a responsive agency. As the Reno Sparks and Washoe decides to approve a community or an area, one of the things you look at is, are resources available? Where are they going to get those resources? One of the first stops they come is talk to TMWA, and can we get facilities to them? And how much is it going to cost? And so we don't lead, we basically follow in response to as you guys approve various developments.
Reactive. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
No? Anyone else? Okay.